I don't know if you are aware of David's Diner. I
Yes.
love David's Diner.
Hmm.
And,
Excellent.
they, I mean, she stood her ground. I mean, Allegheny County tried to come in there. She was following all the rules and she threw them out. I was like, good for you. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, it's your business.
Right.
That's what is funny. You talk about libertarian, like, stay out of my way. I mean, if I'm paying into the system, don't tell me what I should or should not do.
Right. What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do, getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a little break from the show real quick to tell you about the show's sponsors. I am now working with the great Stephen Fox to bring you Fox & Sons coffee. As you can see, I got 2 bags right here, or for those listening, I was holding 2 bags. It is organically roasted up in Michigan. If you're a caffeine addict, much like myself, then head over to foxandsonscoffee.com to get yourself some of their fantastic coffee. They got a light roast, which I'm holding in my hand. They have the Electric Boogaloo blend, which is fantastic as well. I just had it this morning. And if you're like me, you like dark roast coffee, which kicks you right in the freaking face first thing in the morning. They have that for you as well. So head over to foxandsonscoffee.com, use code Kyle, Kyle, to get yourself a little discount. Let them know that I sent you, and get yourself caffeinated, get jacked and tan, and do what you got to do. All right, guys, back to the podcast. Thanks. Roll. All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health. Today, I'm very, very much so looking forward to this conversation. I have Carrie Lewis Delrosso. Please tell me I said that right.
Yep, Delrosso.
Oh, okay. I was close. Anyways, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. As I said, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I don't want to ruin your own introduction, so I'll go ahead and give the floor to you to give my listeners an introduction to who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, I guess I should start off by saying that I'm Carrie Lewis Delrosso. I was the lieutenant governor candidate on the ticket with Senator Doug Mastriano and the 2022 lieutenant governor race. And of course, we weren't successful, unfortunately. But I have a little I got involved with politics in 2017 as a local councilwoman by knocking on doors locally. I knocked on about 2,500 doors in my neighborhood, and I got elected to council. I live in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. I'm not originally from Pittsburgh. I'm originally from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I got involved, and lo and behold, I was on council for a few years, and I decided to run for state house. I ran against the House Minority Leader, Frank Dermody. He was in office for 30 years and basically drew his district in the redistricting to never lose. And I knocked on 13,000 doors, and I beat him. However, with the redistricting happened the year after I got in, the first, I think, line of business for everyone was get rid of the person who did what she wasn't supposed to do. And sure enough, I got out of my seat. I was put into a new completely district of the 64,000 residents that I knocked on doors. I was only going to get 4,000 of them in a 3-to-1 Democrat seat. And the gentleman that had the seat was a very conservative Democrat, which I had great conversations with. He was a pro Second Amendment, pro life Democrat, which in Allegheny County was hard to beat. And he had a brand that people liked. So I decided to run for lieutenant governor. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I would never change it for the world. I got to get to almost all 67 counties. I don't know. I probably got to all 64. But I got to meet so many people. Pennsylvania is such a great state.
Yeah, it kind of broke my heart a little bit when I was considering moving to the great state of Florida, but unfortunately that didn't pull through. But I know I would definitely miss it here if I did so happen to leave. So I want to give you my thoughts on what happened with the midterms, and I'm really curious about some of your takeaways and your thoughts as well. It seemed like abortion kind of was a big deal, and you mentioned you lost your seat at one point to a pro-life Democrat, which is pretty shocking because you almost never hear of that. I am a pro-life person, but I live in Vandergrift, Pennsylvania, so I'm not very far from you at all. But I mean, I go walk my dogs in the morning sometimes, and you can't go a couple houses without seeing a Trump sign. So I thought for sure after 2020, it was going to be a clean sweep. And that's what most people seem to agree with. But it seemed like the outcome actually was blue areas got more blue and red areas got more red. So that's kind of like my brief synopsis of what happened for the midterms. But I'm curious about your thoughts and what you would do differently.
So I see it as we lost on two things, is that we didn't talk about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we should have maybe talked about it a little bit more. After the Dobbs decision, the Shapiro campaign had a lot of money, and they threw a lot of money into media, making sure women understood that this was going to be something on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's not for the governor or the lieutenant governor to decide. It's for the legislative body to argue. And, we couldn't get in front of that. Now, I'm a pro-life mother of 3 who believes in exceptions. And I think that the debate should be on what, not just what the exceptions are, but more the limitations, what people think.
Sure.
And right now, one of the things that I do believe should be on the ballot is taxpayer funded abortions and late term abortions. Taxpayers don't want to and should not have to pay for that unless there's a circumstance, right? Like all circumstances are different, right? I mean, I will say that. But I think it's important that we should have probably talked about it a little bit more as a woman. And I think that we might have kind of, it's just one of those things. And the other point that I'd like to make is the mail-in ballots. So Act 77 was one of the most controversial topics in the last couple of years. Act 77 is here. It's a way to early vote. It's a way to educate. It's a way to get votes in. You talk about Florida. Florida has early voting. Florida is organized. They do it correctly. And they have a Republican governor. So I think that we have to embrace Act 77 a little bit differently. The Democrats really know what to do with it. And when I won my House seat, I had 28% of the mail-in vote because it chased it. I didn't harvest, I chased them. When people were asking for mail-in ballots, I made sure I knew who they were, and I made sure they knew me to vote for me. Right. So I think from an education perspective, those were the 2 biggest things. I think that we didn't win on. And like you say, you're in Vandergrift. I was just out in Apollo Ridge for a game recently, and I see that nobody but Trump and times like that. But I live in Oakmont, and it's Allegheny County, and it's different. It's just right over the hill. Yep. But it's different. And that actually was one of the things that came out during COVID, is that if we were at a basketball game in Allegheny County, everyone had to be masked, and there were limits. But if you drove over the hill to New Kensington, which is Westmoreland County, there was no mask. So it's like, I don't know, I will say this out loud. COVID came into people's lives and made people wow. Just common sense factors. Apparently there was more COVID and, this mile of distance.
Right.
So, oh, Kyle, I don't know.
Yeah, it was very, very upsetting. And my wife and I still talk about it all the time, where I can't believe it's going on 3 years ago almost. But, there were so many local businesses, and I'm a musician as well, if you can't tell. And, some of the bars that my bands used to play at, they're gone. They're gone for good. I mean, this is by my definitions, this is like human rights abuse, is by telling people they can't leave their homes and can't earn a livelihood. So the fact that there are some people that just have this Stockholm syndrome about it is absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Well, and here's what as people, the business owners were furious. And I had some good friends that owned businesses that were, Allegheny County was always, I always say Allegheny County was the worst, because they would shift their business plans like in the heat of a moment. And like, I had friends that owns restaurants that be like, Carrie, like, are we allowed to stay open until this time? And what's the distance from the place to outside, and sidewalk distance? And people were buying benches so they can keep themselves afloat. And you're right. These small towns with these small mom and pop places are gone. They are gone. I don't know if you are aware of David's Diner. I love David's Diner. And, they, I mean, she stood her ground. I mean, Allegheny County tried to come in there. She was following all the rules and she threw them out. I was like, good for you. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's your business. That's what is funny. You talk about libertarian, like, stay out of my way. I mean, if I'm paying into the system, don't tell me what I should or should not do.
Right. Yeah, it was really, really bizarre for me. And I kind of want your story because I enjoy asking people about this a lot. I'm a mechanic and I worked for a dealership in Monroeville, and it's the biggest dealer here in southwestern Pennsylvania. But I thought, oh, this isn't going to affect me. This is going to be absolutely nothing. Like I called from the beginning. I'm like, this could be way overblown. But I had no idea we were going to literally see a restructuring of society as a whole. So my wife was working somewhere where they were building ventilators, so she stayed at work the entire time. But I'm like, man, cars always break. People are going to need their cars fixed no matter what. But I got laid off. And I was working for my dad at the time. And, it's just bizarre to think that literally our lives were completely upended in, what was it, March of 2020, mid-March. So where were you in March of 2020? And what were some of your thoughts? And then as things went on, how did they change?
So I was in March of 2020, I actually was running against the minority leader. So I ran in 2020. I was a one-term girl because they cut me out and the redistricting committee took care of me. But in 2020, I was trying to get out, knock on doors, get signatures, do things. And it basically came to a halt. So it was like a creative campaign from day one, Kyle. Like, I got on the phone. I was putting a mask in my pocket and going out because I didn't want to offend anybody. The Republicans were like, oh, she's a masker. I'm like, no, I need to knock on doors. I'm in a Democrat district. I could lose a vote if I didn't have a mask on me, right? Like, it was, the uncertain times made people completely different. I mean, I had 3 kids home from school. My daughter would get up every morning and throw herself on the ground and just cry. She'd cry because all she wanted to do was go in and be in a structured environment. Now, some kids are homeschooled and that's fine. That's what they're used to. Yeah. I have 3 kids in a public school I'm paying taxes for a school to shut down. We lost all common sense, Kyle. Like, this was the most bizarre, even so, like, I'm glad Governor Wolf is done, but I blame a lot of this on him. I do. Our kids have been titrated back into society. Their activity level had to go back up. Like, our kids were stuck in front of a computer screen, not being able to socialize with their friends for almost a year. Like, I don't know. I'm a kid of the 80s. Like, it's just different. We went and built forts in a patch of woods, and it wasn't like I was disheartened by all of it. But, like, and respectfully so, some people were so scared of the uncertainties that I had to respect them. Like, look, there's in some of the parents, I mean, it's divided parents locally. I still people walking around with masks that immediately, like, if I see them and I want to talk to them, I ask them, like, do you want me to put a mask on? Or are you offended because I don't have one on? Because, look, I don't want to ruin something because people are scared. They still think they're going to die immediately. Meanwhile, they didn't have the data to keep those kids out of school. I'm still mad about that.
Yeah. Well, and you have every right to be. And, I think most other parents are as well. I want to get mad at the people who are still kind of under this illusion that you're going to walk outside and get assaulted by the air. But at the same time, I mean, it was just propaganda nonstop from, everywhere you would look. And, you really can't blame people for feeling the way they did. But at the same time, eventually you kind of have to come to the reality that like we have to go back to life as normal, or at least as, close to 2019 as we possibly could. But unfortunately, I don't think we've necessarily seen the last of this, because I'm sure that, this was kind of like, well, we know we can do this, so we could probably get away from it again. So were you involved at all with the decisions that were made? I can't remember what they were, but I know there were like amendments made to revoke governor's powers for lockdowns. What were your thoughts on that? Did you have any kind of working with that?
What's up, everybody? We're going to take a quick break and tell you about the show's sponsors. We are brought to you by LMNT electrolytes. I've been using this stuff for years, and what I've honestly found is that if I didn't have electrolytes before some kind of cardio, and sometimes even before workouts, that my workout performance, or definitely cardio performance, would suffer greatly. Sodium is responsible for every single movement pretty much in your entire body, and let's say you drink a lot of caffeine like I like to do, then maybe it is a good idea, like I do every single morning, put some LMNT chocolate electrolytes there in your coffee to get a little bit more sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your coffee, so that way whatever diuretic effect you get from the caffeine is pretty much diluted by the fact that you put chocolate salt in it. Also, it tastes really, really good. Get some chocolate cream or hazelnut cream or even coconut, and mix that all up. It tastes really, really good. So yeah, make sure you drop by, go to drinklmnt.com/inlibertyandhealth and pick you up some electrolytes today. All right, guys, thanks.
Yes. So that was your, oh my goodness, I forget what it was, May.
Mm-hmm.
We did it in the primary. And that actually, more people voted for that. More people came out and voted for that. Yes. They didn't want the governor to have the executive powers to keep the shutdowns.
I wonder why.
Well, and look, that's the thing too. It's like, I think that people wanted just to feel safe, but they also wanted to control their own destiny. And, areas that, health departments that are county controlled, like Allegheny, they had the authority to do that. Now, here I am out in Oakmont, PA. I'm not in the city. And in the city, situations are different. So they have to vote based on that kind of stuff. And look, it was tough. I think the governor, and look, he's not a bad guy. I shouldn't be throwing him under the bus too bad, but I think he was more afraid of the backlash, like what happens. But realistically speaking, look, there's a lot of people out there that didn't want to be told you can't go to work, or you need a vaccine to go to work. Look at what happened with Port Authority, and the bus drivers, stopped working. Like, look what happened with our National Guard. I think you asked me about that. Like, it's terrible. You shouldn't be forced or mandated into taking a shot that maybe if there's 10 years worth of research that's being done on it. But look, it's your pathway. And I think that really scares a lot of people on both sides,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess kind of pivoting from that then, I know one thing that Senator Mastriano was big on was energy policy. And this was something I actually researched quite a bit, and I'm curious to your thoughts around it. So fracking is something that I think that we should do a lot more of, because it provides a lot of jobs and it does provide cheap, reliable energy. Because the only reason why we get to have this conversation right now is because of the efficiency of fossil fuels and the way that they allow us to shelter ourselves, transport ourselves, and make everything about our lives better. So what are your thoughts surrounding that, and what were some of the things that you guys wanted to do had you won, or hopefully win in 2024, if you guys are running again, that is?
So I like to call it, I'm a pro energy. I was always a pro energy girl, pro energy candidate. The word, I can't stand the word fracking. It kind of sounds like a dirty word, because that's what the environmentalists have pinpointed it on. Right. They have demonized the word frack. I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that we have significant regulations in Pennsylvania that keep these job sites clean, the energy clean. These gas and oil companies are not only just producing and doing great things, but they have so many educated people on staff. Goodness for gracious, if there's a spill in what happens. And our regulations here in Pennsylvania are extremely, extremely tough.
Mhm.
And I will tell you that because I was on a rig, and I've been to, I've been to Lackawanna College, which actually trains kids in Wyoming County, but trains kids in these local school districts about gas and oil jobs and why it's so important, because these kids get out of high school and they don't know what they're doing.
Mhm.
And we have more gas underneath us in Pennsylvania than anywhere. And I just went for a run in Oakmont. There is a gas. We have more gas, I think, under us here than people realize. You can smell it. Appalachia, it's right here. So, it's absolutely, I am a pro energy girl. And I think it's more of educating people, educating the public on the fact that, what comes from fracking. Well, plastic. I'm a diabetic. Insulin pump supplies, your cell phone materials. Like, these are things that happen. These are things we need. And we can be doing that all locally and have manufacturing locally, which creates jobs, and jobs bring the state back up. If you have people coming here for jobs, then they stay. This isn't rocket science. This is just the fact that we get demonized by the far left when we try to do something.
Yeah, and it is something notable, and I can't stand these people who are just hyper environmentalists, and they omit the entire part that all this technology that's supposedly destroying the environment is what allows them to basically live the lives they live. So it's so ridiculous to me to demonize energy to the degree that they do. So the one thing I know I emailed you about, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but defend the guard legislation.
Yeah, so I saw that the other day on Doug's page. I was looking at it. Since I've been, I decided not to run for that 32nd seat. I've kind of pushed back a little bit.
Sure.
I have 3 kids, and they all play basketball 6 games a week. So I'm trying to do my own thing here.
Right.
But I do know that locally people were in the National Guard and know that they were not able to get their payments because they didn't take the shot. This will reverse it, I'm assuming, correct?
Defend the guard legislation is basically legislation that would I actually didn't know about that, but it was legislation that would require, I believe, Congress to declare that we're going to war before the National Guard can be deployed, and I believe it's up to governors to sign on to this.
No, I haven't been following that. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay then.
I'm kind of taking a little bit of a step back for my own good, I think, because again, it's a very, I don't know if you see what's going on even in the Pennsylvania House. It's a strifeful environment right now.
Yeah.
And I think that the only way we get better is we work together. And I think, the future will be bright at some point, but we need to look at, the most important things, which is protecting Pennsylvania, and making sure that, we're fully funding, education and our law enforcement, and what we just talked about with fracking and putting jobs back in. We can't have red tape. That was one thing that Doug and I really pushed for, is cutting some of this red tape out and getting some of this legislation that we over legislate on.
Right.
Every law that's made has a loophole. That's what I always say. And got to worry about your constituents first.
Absolutely. Well, I like a lot of what you just said there. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about is how would you try to offer a handout to people who say, well, I'm just going to vote for a third party because Republicans and Democrats are the same, which I don't agree with. But there are a lot of people who kind of line up with me as a libertarian that would either are apathetic to voting, or once again, they're just biased to a third party. What would be your pitch to people kind of in that camp?
Well, and I think that from a libertarian perspective, if you hear me speak as a candidate, I'm always on fiscal accountability, transparency, and less government, a lot of less government overreach. Government should be only there to kind of help, like the unemployment, as to hand out and then help, and then move on. People used to come to my office for unemployment. They'd say, I didn't get my unemployment. And I would say, well, have you seen the help wanted signs down the street? and one of the girls that worked in my office, she's like, Carrie, I don't think you're supposed to say that. I said, well, why not? Let's be realistic here,
Right.
And I think that, that's me. That's the candidate I am. I think that one of the things that we really missed this year with Doug and I, especially, is we didn't have the funding for the media, and the media campaign that we should have been doing. I had won every race that I'd ever gotten into until this one. And I say that it's not a loss because we got so many votes. And we just got beat. Like, we didn't get outworked, we got beat. And I think that, if people ask me questions, I've been very realistic with people. I had a harder time convincing people on the far right. When I say far right, like the patriot groups and the Pennsylvania groups that, Doug didn't pick me. So I had to make sure that they understood that. I mean, I got called a rhino, a Democrat. I mean, Rick Saccone, I think, called me a Democrat or something in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And I laughed at him, but I shouldn't have had a hard time. I shouldn't have been wasting my time convincing people in my own party that I was a conservative. I should have been going out and getting Democrat votes, which I'm very, very good at. And I miss that. And I think that when people know me, and I've, a lot of people have said this to me in the last couple of weeks, is that, we love you, Carrie. We love you. We need you to run again. And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, okay. So I guess that gives a good pivot as well. What are your plans for the future? Because everything you've said on this podcast, I, for the most part, agree with. And I think you're a very, very likable person and obviously a very, very likable candidate. So what are your plans for the future?
Well, at this point, I'm going back to work. I had a public relations communications, like a business development business, before I decided to run for office. So I started doing contract work January 1st, and I'm happy. I took a break for like a month or so. And right now, behind the scenes, also helping the party out to see what I can do in terms of making sure that we're picking good candidates. Candidates win races. Money wins races too, but candidates win races. People don't like when I say that. But if you don't have a good candidate, then, but what happens with any party is that, people pick one candidate and and then if their candidate doesn't win, well, then they've gone back to their house and they're mad about something. We've got to work together as a party. And I think that going forward, if the climate is right, I will run for something again. I just don't know what. Okay. I'm excited about the presidential race coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be our candidate. I would like to see, and I'm going to be very frank, I would like to see Ron DeSantis be the candidate.
Okay. Okay, so, yeah, that's fair. So, are there anyone is there anyone in particular here in Pennsylvania that you're that you have a fond eye for, that you think is going to really be somebody? Because I've been a little out of local politics and politics as a whole because I've been focused on more foreign policy stuff recently. But who locally, or at least just statewide, kind of has you excited?
Statewide right now? Well, I have a couple candidate meetings that are coming up for these judicial races. Megan Martin, I've met and I like her, and I'm meeting a couple people this week to see who they are. Right now, I mean, that's what everyone's focusing on statewide. We'll have a Senate race in a year or so. I don't know who's going to run for that yet, but that's a very important race. That'll be against Bob Casey, who's from Lackawanna County, where I grew up. So I think that's a winnable seat. And then, down the road, I'm not sure where, what I'll be doing or where I'll be going. It's kind of, like I said, the climate is tough right now. And I think that's why I talked about the presidential race. Like, I was a huge Trump supporter. I spoke in front of 30,000 people just now with him. But I think that we have to come to terms with our presidential candidate, and we need to get behind someone to beat the Democrat. If Biden's going to win, we have to beat him. We have to. I have to. Like, there's just no doubt. This man has ruined our country. He has ruined our country. His vice president is absolutely terrible. I'm shocked that we're allowing this. He just went to the border. Like, come on. All these drugs that are filtering into our state. Like, it's not good.
Right.
It's not good.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't believe Trump would win if he ran again in 2024. I think the handling of 2020 was pretty rough on him, and then his performance in the debates, he really didn't look good. And it's kind of hard to tell people, let's keep America great, after they just survived, the summer of George, as some may call it, and 2020 and losing their businesses. DeSantis, though, has a record saying that I wouldn't do that, and I stood up for Americans when it actually mattered. So I know you have a little bit of a time limit, but the one question I try to ask just about every single guest before I get them off of here, what does liberty look like to you?
So freedom, people staying away from people's business. That's what I think liberty to me is that anyone who feels liberated is more independent, right? Like, that's where I see it. Part of me sometimes thinks, I am technically a little bit more independent than anybody, but at the same time, my Republican values are very solid. I was raised by a very solid Republican grandfather. So I think that's kind of where I tend to we've got to get this country back on track. I don't think we're teaching liberty and freedom in the schools anymore. I think our public education has gotten away from cursive writings. The kids can't even read the Constitution, for crying out loud. We've got to smack this back into place. And it's interesting. My daughter sent me, she called me a little bit ago, and she said, "Mommy, is it okay if I get TikTok?" And I said, "Absolutely not," without even hesitation. And she said to me, "Well, mommy, my friends have it." I said, "Yeah, well, the answer is no." And, again, it's like, we are filtering these garbage into our kids' minds, and we're allowing it by the technology that's coming in, and it's not being controlled by us. It's being controlled by a different country. It's terrible. So I think that, liberty means to me that, self-liberation, just, and making sure that we have the freedom of speech, and we can't ever get that taken away. Even though, sometimes we're silenced. It's tough.
Yeah. Believe me, my YouTube has had quite a few strikes for speaking out against, the shot, and even questioning the what happened in 2020, where two people from different parties had won, and there were supposedly some issues, but you can't question that on YouTube, which is absolutely baffling to me. And just one thing I want to touch on before I let you go is that Trump, I think, represented a culture, and you won't find anybody who criticized Trump more than me from kind of a right-wing perspective, but he represented this cultural idea of really what America stands for, and the average, like, blue-collar kind of guy. I really think those values are something that we need to instill into people, and kind of the culture that we need to represent going forward, so that way we can get back to what made this country so great, is liberty and freedom, and this rugged individualism, and being able to be dependent on yourself, and also trust your neighbors and love your neighbors. So I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but if you don't have anything else to add, you can go ahead, tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll close her out.
So on Facebook, Carrie Lewis Delrosso for PA. I did keep I kept my page going. I do have a site, Carrie for PA. And I encourage people to still engage. I'm thrilled to be kind of sitting back right now. I told my kids, Mom's on the bench. But I think that's important right now. I think there is still a lot. The dust is still out there and needs to settle a little bit. But if it's my turn and my calling to go back in, look, I'm a fighter. That's how I knocked off the leader, by my beliefs. And I still, I stand true to them. I was, like I said, raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania. One side of the family were Democrats, Italian Catholics, and the other side was Republican Baptists. And we still broke bread together. We still had great conversations. Politics were a lot different then. People voted for the candidate. And I think that's what we need to get back to.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, well, I really, really appreciate this conversation. I think we need to have more of these. You have an open invitation to come back anytime if you feel angry about anything that's going on in the government. But yeah, Carrie, if you don't have anything else, we'll close her out.
All right. Thank you so much, Kyle. Have a good one.
Of course. Thank you. You too.